Klik Analytics and LinkedIn, so you can check that out. And we'll have some more stuff talking about the data culture. And so the reason that we're doing this, I just recently did a talk at the Klik Summit, and part of the talk was about data analytics. And I was really quite surprised at the amount of people that came up afterwards and said, tell me more about it, or I want to talk to to the CEO. This is something that we've been discussing, because analytics obviously is a buzzword now, but the question is, how do you get it going? And I found that the most important thing is to have an idea about the data culture itself. And so this is the reason that we decided to do this seminar. And the data culture kind of mirrors the culture within the company itself. And it becomes really highlighted when you start looking at some of the numbers, or you start looking at some of the processes that the data will point to. That usually ties hand in hand with whatever other culture you have within the company. If your company, for example, is siloed, then the data will probably be siloed as well. If you have processes that are not really determined beforehand, then the data will probably show that as well. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in this business, we're a managed service provider at its core. So we manage other people's networks. I've been in this business since it started. And then I, over time, went into customer relations. And from that, I started looking at the data, typically based around issues with customers or issues with service. And then from that, I went into the data analytics. So now I'm full in on the data analytics. Been with Klik for 5 years. And we kind of jokingly say that I'm the data evangelist. So I talk a lot about data. And I think it's important. And so why is it important? Well, before I go to that, let me tell you about, after I go through the slides, we're going to talk to Karen, who has been with us for 4 years. She also has 20 plus years experience. And we've had a lot of conversations with customers and a lot of conversations around data analytics. And Karen is really a pro and totally understands the concept, especially about some of the tools and about the data analytics, data culture as well. All right, so what we're going to explore today is we're going to talk about the key elements of a healthy data culture, the characteristics of a data culture that is lacking or unhealthy, and how leveraging your data analytics can help your business thrive. And a few takeaways that you'll probably hear throughout is data culture is people-based. You could probably bring in a psychologist to do a study on the different dynamics within an organization, but it's all revolved around people. The data culture is exactly the same. It's going to mirror your existing culture. And so a lot of times there's changes that will happen within the culture of the company when you start using data. And one of the things that we really want to hit home is what we call a notice and wonder. So notice and wonder is, if you look at the data, what do you notice and what do you wonder? This is primarily the most important thing from a data cultural standpoint that you want to kind of model and train and get people to really start not just looking at a number, but what does the number mean, and what are some of the things that are going on behind the scenes to give you whatever it is that you're looking at. And the other thing that you'll definitely take home is that this is a top-down it has to start at the top and work its way down. Although it may be introduced somewhere in the middle, somebody in middle management, for example, may have an interest in it, and that may be pushed up to the top. But until it's pushed to the top, it really will not be effective throughout the entire organization. So you need buy-in from the very top. As you go down through the organization, then you have to have different things going on. So what is data analytics? So data analytics is like detective work. And I say that especially because the notice and wonder. I say that because it truly is detective work. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a law firm and you're having issues with collections. And so your collections are slow, and maybe you're even having some issues with some billing. How much? Why did they charge me this much, or whatever? And so a lot of times what will happen is that the end of the process, they'll be the ones taking the heat for slow collections, say, for example. But then if you start looking at some of the data, you might find out that people aren't putting in their time. They're not putting in their time properly, or they're not putting in their time. They're doing it late. So the entries are not accurate. And so the customer starts complaining about that. Or they're not putting in their time at the frequency that you need to get the bills out properly. And so in that case, what you primarily would look at is some KPIs. So, for example, I did a search for KPIs for law firms, and it came up with a really good list of 52 KPIs just for a law firm. And in this case, let's say you're having issues with collections or issues with billing, it may go back to the utilization. And when you start looking at how people are being utilized, whether they're billable or not billable, all of these things may uncover process issues, and it may also include something where you're monitoring the numbers a little bit closer, say, for example, on utilization and when time is put in. And that would reduce potential. The closer you put the time in, then you would potentially reduce the number of complaints out the other end. So in this case, it definitely was not just a collection issue. It was potentially a utilization issue, and you could put processes in place to make sure that everybody is putting their time in properly. That would just be a very simple example, but it's truly like detective work. It's not just numbers. The numbers mean something. The numbers came from something, and the numbers represent something. But typically, it's also about process issues or reporting issues. So it reveals key insights, patterns, and trends, like for the example I gave, and it helps you better understand situations and solves problems and makes smarter business decisions. And again, it also, for analytics, it also is for informed decision making. I like to use the blind squirrel analogy that, if you throw a bunch of nuts out on a patio and you have a blind squirrel, they're going to find one. But if you have eyes, then you can see all of the nuts and get all the nuts. And a lot of times with businesses, the decision making typically is done by gut reaction or what somebody thinks. But when you start looking at the data, you may find out that your thinking actually was a little bit off. It's going to offer a competitive advantage as well, because if you have two companies that have the same service, for example, but one is using their analytics to improve their processes and to identify key points to make their business better, they're going to have a better competitive advantage. And that ties also into the efficiency and productivity. So what is data culture? Data culture refers to an organizational environment that practices data-driven decision making. That's decision making. That's not just looking at numbers. It's actually using the numbers to make decisions. And so as I'm talking, by the way, if you resonate with anything, feel free to put something in the chat and give me a thumbs up or an amen or whatever you want to do. But I'm hoping that after, especially as Karin and I talk, that it will kind of prompt you to start thinking about how you can use analytics and how you can improve your data culture as well. All right. So what data culture is not? It's not using data in a punitive way. Although there is certain cases where the data can be used for, say, performance reviews or assign KPIs to individuals. And if they're outside of those KPIs, it may be a chance to coach or perhaps something else, but it's not to be used as a weapon. And that, I believe, is one of the primary pushbacks of data culture. And that is that people think, oh, now you're spying on me, or, these numbers are wrong, or whatever the case may be. This is all part of the educational process to help them understand that this is purely to make the business run better. And it will also help them do their jobs better. And in the case I used in the very beginning, where maybe the collections department was taking all the heat, but it really wasn't them necessarily. It was somewhere else in the company, but it just ended up on them. And so you definitely don't want to use it as a weapon, although it could uncover some issues, but it's not the primary role to use it, just to beat people up. The other thing is, it is not just going through a bunch of numbers really fast. Say, let's look at the numbers and then decide, okay, now we move on. But no, what does it mean, right? So what does this data mean? And so you have to constantly employ the notice and wonder, and say, a lot of times it's very obvious. You have some numbers that are off, or maybe you have, like in our case, we're a service industry, we have SLAs. So an SLA was missed. And so you want to make sure that you don't just look at numbers, but you understand what they mean and how it can affect your organization. And so also, it's not just information to be used at the top level, although that's the place you start, is at the top. Most of our clients, we start at the top and figure out some key KPIs at the top level. And then we start pushing it down through the organization. And so that's very important as well. What's characteristics of a healthy data culture? Data-driven decision-making. And so I kind of talked about that before, on how you make decisions based on that. The careful metric selection, that basically is the KPIs, the key performance indicators. And those are chosen specifically to help you reach your business goals, or particular goals within a department, or particular goals within, for an employee. And so you want to be purposeful in picking, and usually we start off with some 2 or 3 in the beginning. And like I said, as we go through the organization, we start picking other KPIs to help improve processes and profitability. The other thing is collaboration. A lot of times what I've seen is that the data people or the analytics people are involved at the end of the processes. But then you have to go back sometimes and re-engineer the processes, because the data people might be like, well, what about this? Or how can we measure this? And make changes in the process. So include your data analytics people in the very beginning. It's very important. Include them throughout the processes. This is something that we model within Klik, and it's been very effective. I've been on both sides of it. I don't like to be on the side where I'm brought in last, because generally speaking, either our hands are tied and we can't do what we think we should be able to do, or it requires a rewrite of some of the processes. The data needs to be accessible to the employees, and it should not be siloed, and also specialized training for all stakeholders. One of the things that I found in a data culture is it's not necessarily intuitive for everyone. And so if you have someone who doesn't necessarily have that notice and wonder, I think training would go a long way to explain to them why it's important, and then start going through some exercises of notice and wonder to go through their own data. What do you notice and what do you wonder? And as you model that more and more, it helps build a healthier data culture as well. And also data literate employees. So that's pretty much also what I just said, is that education and helping the employees understand the data is very important. Data governance is basically who gets access to the data, what's the flow of the data, and make sure you have security protocols put in place so you don't share data to one employee that should be for upper management, for example. And it should be employee and customer focused. Customer focus is extremely important because ultimately that's where the money comes from. So I can tell you from our example that when we started putting this in place, we were getting, this is many years ago, we went through a period where we were getting a number of bad surveys. And so we started looking at the data, and I can proudly say now that we very rarely get a bad review. Our reviews now are like 98, 99%, a lot of months, 100% positive. You could argue, I suppose, that people don't put in negative reviews, but that's not true because I've seen both. And you want to have transparency to understand exactly what it is you're looking at and why you're looking at it. All right. So what is unhealthy data culture? So reactive role of data teams, that kind of ties into what I said, is that you don't want to be at the, you don't want the cart in front of the horse, right? And so in order for this to be effective, you need to involve your data team throughout the whole process as you're developing these processes. You don't want to overestimate data readiness, because if you push something out too soon, people will start to question the data, and they really need to have trust in the data and verify the data. So that takes a little bit of time. We talked a little bit about toxic overall culture. If you have toxicity in the culture of your company, it's going to show up in the data culture glaringly. And then also lack of leadership investment. It has to come from the top, and no clear strategic focus. Another thing is inconsistent or inefficient data processes. You want to make sure that your processes are efficient, and the data can kind of help verify that. You don't want to have data silos, and you don't want to just focus on the tools. You want to focus on the results. The tools like Tableau or Power BI, these are all great, but they're just tools. The data and the actual business processes are the most important thing. All right, so I ran through this. I didn't want to, again, kind of PowerPoint you to death, but I wanted to run through some of these. We'll send this to you so you can understand. This is like basically an appetizer. Each one of these slides, we could spend a lot of time. I'd love to talk to you, in person, and we could go through this. Or if you ever have any questions about anything that I've said or any of these slides, just let me know. All right, so let's go to the next section. And we're going to talk with Karin. And Karin and I are going to kind of just dialogue with a few things. Hello, Karin.
Hey, Bill. Welcome, everybody. SLA service level agreement, we'll be able to get into that a little bit more. But we're excited to have everybody here today. As Bill said, while he's the data evangelist, I'm that big cheerleader right alongside him, because quite frankly, I believe that benefits small and large, or this could be beneficial to businesses small and large. And, I think it's important to help businesses realize how to take that first step. So, excited. Thank you for inviting me to join you today, Bill.
Oh, absolutely. You were definitely the one I wanted on this. So, as we said before, Karin and I collaborate a lot on this. And so let's go to let's go. So Karin, what are some of the successes and pitfalls you've encountered or observed with clients on this data journey?
Well, one thing I have to say is the biggest pitfall is clients not knowing how to take that first step and just not embarking on that journey. So I'm going to reiterate some of the things that Bill said, but about it having to start at the top. But when I've seen successful outcomes, there were some key characteristics. We had a champion in leadership. And they realized that to instill a data culture, this isn't something you set it and forget it. It's something that you have to review that data, look and see what KPIs you want to be tracking. I talk to my clients all the time and say, take off the blinders for IT, cyber, and cloud. What challenges are you facing? And then we back up from there and we're able to look at, okay, well, what systems do you have? I hear you, your data is siloed. Well, even more reason how this could be applicable. So when clients embrace that mentality and then also understand that, it's like an iceberg. You start with that small project possibly, but once that culture really carries through your organization and gets adopted, then folks start coming at you with different requests. Could we get a dashboard for showing our most profitable clients? Or, hey, we're really having a hard time gauging if our in-person networking versus our online marketing and other activities, what are actually having the best results for my nonprofit to do the best fundraising for our mission? Well, this helps you, remove any biases, intentional or not, and be able to look at it, with a clear mind and carry that through.
Very good. Yeah, one of the things I found really interesting is when we were going through kind of introducing data within our own organization, I thought it was just us, right? And some of the issues and some of the pushback and some of the things that happened throughout this journey, but it wasn't. And that was really interesting. Like, we're all in the same boat, right? And so as it turned out, as we talked about it, people resonated with it. They're like, yeah, right. So if you don't have leadership buy-in, but yet you have, somebody in, say, mid-management that knows the value of it, but they can't get anywhere until they get buy-in, right? Or once you get buy-in, then you get resistance throughout the organization. And so it's common amongst all of us. It's really, really powerful to see just the similarities between organizations, because we all may measure different things, but
absolutely,
the processes of getting there is the same, right? So,
and success-wise, just before we move on, I look at all the time, who doesn't want to have better customer satisfaction? Who doesn't want to make sure that they're best utilizing their staff? Who doesn't want to make sure that they're not taking steps that they could otherwise take to be more proactive with their clients' requests and approaches? It's something that, as you mentioned, shouldn't be punitive, but if we can look at these things, any organization, and look at how can we be better and work smarter and do that, we all win. So
I love it. We could keep going on with this, but let's move on to the next one. Right. And so we kind of talked about this. We'll briefly talk about this one. How do you see buy-in affecting the building of a data culture? Right. And so I was going to mention that we have one client that started it, like they started at the top. Right. Remember, they were using paper, right? Paper and Excel spreadsheets. Right. But they trusted that paper and they trusted that spreadsheets. Right. And then when we went in and showed them the visualization of it, they would go back and look at our number, the visualization, and look at the numbers. And
so surprised it was always right.
Right. Well, yeah, obviously you have to have the right accurate data, but anyway, go on.
So
What do you think?
yeah, no, the one thing I would add is, so we've already, I don't want to beat it to death. You need buy-in up top, but I think what's also important when we're talking about culture through an organization is the fact that you need to make sure that the team's aware and they see this data, whether you start rolling out different dashboards for different teams. And then, you get that feedback to make sure that you keep honing what you've done, and then celebrate those successes. Make sure people are aware of it, because at that point, that's when folks start seeing the benefits, and then they'll also start communicating and then giving feedback, so that this can continue to grow. Because, as I said before, it's not something you set and forget. You need to, as truly having it part of the culture, make sure that you're reviewing and you're tweaking and, realizing, hey, maybe what we thought we needed to track originally isn't as important. And you identify areas that would have a profound impact.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So let's talk about some of the benefits of using analytics and give some more examples. I'm gonna move on to the next slide here. And so
I was going to ask if we could.
All right. So go ahead.
No, so, one thing that obviously is top of mind for me, because as in the last 3-4 years, what have we seen? We've seen cybersecurity go through the roof. As a result, what have we also seen? Federal, state, local governments are being more stringent with their requirements for compliance and regulatory standards. So what's the real world impact of that? Well, real world impact is a lot, higher demand for reporting that has to be done. I've seen instances, and we have a client where there were 2 full-time employees spending a week each a month gathering, manually collecting data so that they could get these items submitted and not be fined. Well, the benefits of these dashboards, having clean data, having those regular meetings, Bill and his team were able to identify and create these, delivery of dashboards that we're now going from 2 people for a full week a month. We're looking at 2 hours of validating data. That's real world impact, right? So I think that's the one thing I love talking about. But, what about a law firm or an architecture firm? And they're seeing their sales numbers have gone up, but they're not seeing the increase in their profitability. Why? Well, looking at those projects and looking at the resources and looking at the hours spent gives the leadership to realize, hold on a second, why do we have our senior architects or our partners involved in this activity when there's work that could be getting done by associates? And making sure you're reallocating those resources and identifying how you and your clients can exceed or succeed, rather. I can keep going, but I don't want to babble on, Bill, if you want to throw in any examples here.
Yeah, well, I can speak for, us internally at Klik Solutions. There's been probably a good 80% of the time when we're creating some sort of measurement for something, whether it's the service level agreement or whatever the case may be, that it almost always involves an internal process issue. And that's why I'm really key to say it's not just a bunch of numbers, right? So profit and loss is good, right? But if you have profit and loss, those are pretty pure numbers. But what's behind those numbers, right? You might find out that you're spending too much time on this one particular project and it's not profitable. Why did you spend so much time on it? And as you dig down into the numbers, you can find out, like, what was the root cause, right? So, we have something, whenever you have an incident in the IT world, a lot of times if it's like a server outage or something, you do a root cause analysis. So data analytics is basically a continual root cause analysis. You want to find out what was the root cause and what are you going to do to kind of fix it in the future, right?
Absolutely.
Now, the other thing I was going to say is that each company is going to have a different set of measurements, but they're all going to be kind of the same thing in a way, right? And so this can be tailored to your particular organization. Well, it obviously has to be tailored to your particular organization, but it's all about, going through different areas. And when you look at this data and when you utilize the data and when you do the notice and wonder, and you have a culture of notice and wonder, and you have the buy-in from everybody, next thing you know, you're taking this machine, your company, this machine, and it's going from a VW to a Ferrari, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
For
next
sure.
thing you know, you're more profitable. One example is utilization. So when you look at utilization, are we in too many meetings? Should we be in this many meetings? Or a department wants to hire because they're too busy. I can't tell you how many times we've looked at the data and found out, no, you're not too busy. You're just not utilized properly. Right? And so let's tighten this machine up a little bit, and then we'll talk about hiring. Right? And this is true amongst everything that we uncover.
Absolutely. Because oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, because across so many industries, be it a law firm, a medical facility, a warehousing or logistics company, manufacturing. Okay, there's components that go into what you're offering a client. So, I'll say manufacturing. I know, there were questions about how do you track this? Okay, well, we have dashboards and we might be creating to track that profitability. If we have certain business units or products or ingredients, and we're tracking the trends of those increased costs, and then we're also tracking the trends of the sales prices and sales numbers, you can go back and look at those trends. What you're tracking can all feed into seeing the improvement over time. So, I think it's so applicable across any industry, which is why I'm going to go back and just make sure I reiterate, what business challenges are you facing? And when you look at those, that's when, Bill's team is fantastic at talking and working with folks of let's now take steps back. And as we start seeing and unwrapping what's involved in those problems and what tie into them, then you're able to get that clearer view and identify what's the best way and what visibility would help. I'm not an analyst, but I can look at dashboards we create for clients and so many times say, why is that one outlier there? And it gives you this eye-opening experience of, okay, well, let's drill deeper. And the clients quite often identify something that can have a significant impact.
Yeah, and those outliers a lot of times are quite shocking, right? So we've had clients that have looked at some of these outliers and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is so upside down. And then they had to fix something or fix the process. And so, all right. So Karin, you and I could talk about this forever, but I really want to get to the point where we can maybe get some, answer some of the questions. But let's talk a little bit about kind of where we're at for analytics and a little bit where we're at from a future standpoint. You can see that, look at the growth in the amount of money people are spending on analytics, right? And this is not just a Fortune 500 thing. This is, this is for everybody, right? And so the market growth is gone, 750 million to 2.94 billion in 2019, and projected to be 33 billion in 2025, right?
Huge.
And so there's a lot of spending going on, but I can virtually assure you that the limitations on all of that spending is the data culture. 100%. Like I'm a firm believer on that. I've experienced it and we've seen other people experience. But as far as the future is concerned, it's not just about spending money. It's about also being smarter. And the tools now are becoming better and better. For example, obviously AI is a big thing, right? AI and automation, right? And so we haven't even talked about automation. We could do a whole webinar on that. So if you tie your analytics with automation, and so automation is basically doing things that so people don't have to do, or improving or speeding up their ability to do something, like even something as simple as schedule meetings. I added on my Teams a button where I can just click and automatically find an available time with the person I'm talking with and book the meeting. So I didn't have to go in there and, click this and click that to get it. Or perhaps it's a notification. Like in our case, we use a lot of that to notify people, hey, a customer just updated the ticket, and it goes straight into Teams. So there's a whole another element, which I kind of consider analytics, but it's really automation. And then the best thing, the thing that I'm most excited about, is the AI, right? Yeah. And so, what we're working on right now is, we're going to have the ability to look at all of the ticket information and all of the information that is in our database or collection of databases, have it learn that data and be able to, instead of saying, hey, can you give me a chart for this or give me a chart for that, be able to ask a question. What's our least profitable client? What's our most profitable client? Which client have we spent the most amount of time on? Different questions. And it not only gives you the answer, but it gives you the visualization. This is where the future is heading, right? And so I'm completely 100% sold on the idea of analytics, obviously self-proclaimed data evangelist. But I really believe if you miss this boat, you're going to miss a lot, and it's going to hit the bottom line, and you're not going to be as competitive.
Absolutely. And I feel like, as being an MSSP, I have to also reiterate, part of the beauty of where AI is going is that we're not looking at necessarily a vulnerability where it's open to the web. You could be searching within your own IT environment. So you have your data secure, you have your CRMs. Well, hey, let's search within our own environment, keeping that secure, having the permissions where they need to be, but then really speeding up the process. I like telling folks that, a quick snippet of what analytics means. We help business leaders make more informed decisions faster. That's it, at the most basic level. And by integrating and where the future is, I think those silos and the lift to get there is going to be so much lighter.
All right. So, Karen, let's stop talking and let's see if we can get some questions.
I'm looking at
the only thing I'll say
yeah.
at the very end is, your data will take you places. What's your destination? Let's go on to the questions.
Bill, how do we see? Well, I think we already touched on the AI. I saw that Jessica had a question about what key performance indicators do we recommend tracking? I'd say it's a little difficult because it's so specific to your industry, but Bill, I would love to have you take this one.
Well, again, utilization, I think, is a key one that's true across all companies, right? And so as you go through utilization is what are people working on, and how long is it taking them, right? And what utilization probably is common across all companies because there's people involved and there's processes involved. So I would definitely start with utilization, and then perhaps profit and loss. Right. In our case, since we're a service industry, we get paid a certain amount of money and we spend a certain amount of time. What's the difference between the two? You come up with your utilization number, right, or your profitability number. And I would say those would be two key things. But this is tailored specifically for your company, and feel free to reach out to us and we can talk a little bit more and we can kind of suggest. I had a call with a law firm, and even I, being in analytics, I'm like, well, what kind of things could a law firm, and then I found this article. It was 52 things to measure, and they were all fantastic, right? I was like, This would be a serious machine if you implemented all of these. So it's customizable. I don't know if that answers your question properly, but we could go into more detail for that. But I would say utilization for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm really excited, Dante, because so the question is, how do you think automation and data culture will impact the workforce in the next 3 to 5 years? To hit home what Bill was just saying, I think it's going to help productivity. It's going to help us work smarter. It's going to help us cut down some of the time of those tasks that you go down that wormhole and distract you from your focus, and being able to truly access, reply, and plan more efficiently because you have clean data. Something Bill always says is the data doesn't lie. And, you know, in his department, they know where the bodies are hidden, right? So, you know, so I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to become much more ingrained throughout our systems. Heck, Microsoft just came out with Copilot. I'm really excited to start playing around with that. Bots, you know, are becoming more prevalent. That's kind of what Bill was referencing with being able tied in with automation. Bill, what do you think?
Well, I think the future is here, and now's the time to do it, because otherwise you'll get left behind, right? And again, with the AI is very important. It's fairly new. You don't want your stuff to be public, so the AI we're talking about is private AI, right? And so it's your information, not shared anywhere else, and in the automation as well. And the visualizations just by themselves are powerful. Because imagine looking through a spreadsheet compared to looking at a chart, right? It's two different things. It's the same data, but one's visualized and one's not. So, you know, I think that that's going to be key as well. All right.
Okay, so what sources would you recommend to build a better understanding on data analytics and implementation and usage? Honestly, I not to do a self plug, but I mean, Klik just released a fantastic ebook that can give you some insight. But you know, taking that first step of having that meeting and you know and having that partner to be able to help kind of guide the way, to be able to identify those KPIs, identify what the best implementation strategy would be for your unique organization. But that's my 2 cents on this. How about you, Bill?
Yeah, well, again, each industry is different. Where I personally would start is I would go to ChatGPT or something and just talk to it and say, this is the type of company I have, what type of recommendations are in the Bing or whatever. And it probably even better, you know, what type of analytics, you know, what type of KPIs, for example. And so a lot of times when I run into a new company and I don't necessarily know exactly what their processes are, right? There's some basic ones around finance and around customer experience and around utilization, but there may be some specific ones for that industry. I would just go to ChatGPT or any of the AI tools and ask it questions, and you'll be surprised. It gives you a lot of really good information like that.
Yeah.
And you can call us as well, and we'll be more than happy to do that. But I do a lot of research, and that's typically what I do. I just start asking questions, and then it generates the answers for me.
Yeah, well, and I'll just add on that. I love ChatGPT, but also knowing don't just put in a question and take that for gospel, right? If you're going to use those tools, fine tune it. I'll put in a question and then I'll say, well, can you make this more relatable, or can you make it more technical? What about this specific industry? And as you keep asking questions, you can get it to become more specific to what you want. Okay, yeah, so from Liz. Sorry.
So I was just going to say real quick before we go to the next question. Again, the Klik Analytics LinkedIn. I'm really not trying to do a plug, but the team has written some really good articles, and we're going to continue as a result of this webinar. You know, we're going to put out a lot more information about the analytics and the culture and some of the trends. But you can go back and look at some of the stuff that we already have. It's really well written and very informative, not a lot of fluff. And so we're going to continue to try and educate and try and evangelize other companies to be able to get there. So stay tuned for that. We obviously, we're going to send at the end of this a bunch of links that I think will be very useful. It's going to go into a lot more depth because of the time constraints that I had. So you can expect that afterwards as well.
Wonderful. I don't know how much time we have left, but Liz was asking if we could talk about the power of visualization with clients as compared to spreadsheets. Liz, it's night and day. I mean, you take a spreadsheet that's this thick, and what are you going to see? You're going to see the bottom line. But when you visualize that data, you actually see how you get there. And you have the ability to drill down and look at the specifics of what are all the ingredients in that sauce, right? And but Bill, I'm sure you have some good insight here.
Well, the one thing that came to mind from a personal example is we get a lot of alerts from network devices and servers and computers, and we have a ticket system, and it's basically like a spreadsheet. It's online. You can look at it line by line. And one of the things that we created is we can take all of that data and visualize it. And we created a very simple gauge. The bigger the circle, the more alerts, for example, right? So it was just a bunch of circles, and the bigger the circle, the more alerts were. And so we're able to we're able to isolate where the noise is coming from within a network and proactively start fixing these problems where you couldn't do that just looking at a list. You might see this ticket or that ticket or that. And so that we created this very simple gauge that gives you a visualization, and then you can click into that and get all of that data that's underlying so you can make the decision.
Yeah.
But it's basically as simple as make the big circle go away. The customer's happy because they want to just work. They don't want their stuff broken. And obviously we don't want to spend, 1 billion hours on it. So if we're proactive about it, and that visualization alone has made the customers a lot happier and made us a lot better as a company.
Absolutely. I love Riley's question. And if you don't mind, I'm going to jump to that one. As a small business owner, having a data analytics team seems to be cost prohibitive. Do you think that the analytics results would help boost company sales? Yes. So what I tell people, Riley, is that the beauty of where analytics is now, or at least the way I've seen with us doing it, is you can find ways to utilize the tools and teams where you don't have to hire a team of FTEs, full-time employees, but it's also not cost prohibitive for a smaller business. The impact can be profound. And, my biggest recommendation, and I'd love to hear, what type of sales to be able to give more specific examples, but, looking at your sales, okay, where do they come from? Utilizing where folks are investing their time. We have clients with CRMs. They're using Salesforce. Guess who they're using to create dashboards for their sales team? Klik. Because what we're able to do is go in and customize that data specifically where it's from. Well, you might be using Salesforce, but you also have another system that is the source of revenue or information and leads coming in. Well, those are those data silos that we kept talking about. What if we can pull data from those different systems and be able to have one screen where you're able to go in and once again have an unbiased view of looking at where the real numbers are and where should you be making that investment in time.
Let me
sorry,
pick up
I got
on
excited with that one. Please.
I know. I think the first part of the question is the cost associated with having your own data team. This reminds me of kind of the very beginning of what's called MSP, the managed service providers, right? Where where people had their own IT people, and then they had to have the salaries for their IT people, and then they had to have the training for the IT people. And even within that organization, they had only limited abilities because they were only working on that one network. Well, when the MSP business came in, it was basically, we have a team of people, and we have the skills, and we have the knowledge, and we have the training, and so it was it was definitely, from a cost saving standpoint, it was better to hire it as a service than it was to hire internally. That's not always the case. In most small businesses, it is. I see analytics as exactly the same thing. Analysts are not cheap, right? And a good analyst. And then if you're just starting out, how do you know what a good analyst is or not? And so a service similar to ours, where we do analytics as a service, we're able to have that skills and the expertise, but we're not just working on one business, we're working on other businesses. And so that collective knowledge also pays dividends. Yeah. I hope that answers
absolutely. And just to add to that, before we move to Finn's question, is, I always tell folks, it doesn't mean you have to necessarily get rid of people that you have in-house. What it allows them to do is be more strategic, and then leverage these resources to be able to then hone in and be more focused on your approach going forward. And Riley, or I'm sorry, Finn's question about utilizing your employees better. Bill will be able to talk about this more, but the one thing I will add, I'll talk about Klik. We grew 200% in 2020, right? A lot of companies experience growth like that, they implode. What did we do? I have to give our CEO so much credit, Arthur and Bill, for approaching, hey, let's invest in Tableau. Let's look at the numbers. Are we utilizing folks the way we should? Do we need to add more people? Do we need to have folks focus in different roles? And being able to identify that utilization, it's not, going back to one of the questions earlier, 3 to 5 years, I don't see it replacing people. It's allowing you to be more specific and more honed in, which will increase profitability, increase customer satisfaction. I mean, the benefits are countless, but what are your thoughts, Bill?
Yeah, so all employees are not created equally, right? And what I mean by that is they all don't perform equally. And sometimes it's on them, and sometimes it's on management. And the data can help identify both of those areas, right? And so as an organization, we have certain KPIs for employees, and these are their numbers, so to speak, right? And so now they have a defined, their task is defined, their goals are defined, and they're measured, and they're held accountable, right? And that is where you start. Like, how you collect the utilization information it could be different things, right? So there's some tools out there that we've used for some companies where it'll tell you pretty much everything they do on a daily basis based on their computer activity, right? I remember when I set one up for a company, and I looked and I said, "Is this person in marketing?" And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Well, why are they on Instagram for 5 hours a day?" Right? And so, some companies think that's Big Brother, but you're paying for people to work. And so if you want to go to that level, you can get down to that. We don't use tools like that, but we have a ticket system. So we're able to see how many tickets did they touch? How long did they spend on them? How many meetings did they have? And so we've created gauges that are very easy to remove these different groups, right? Meetings or internal meetings, or project time, or ticket time, or any of those things. And you could uncheck or select or uncheck any of those and look at the utilization. Right. I personally think utilization is probably one of the best places to start. And so I don't know if that helps, if that answered your question or not. I hope it did, but if not, we'd love to talk to you more.
And I think we're getting messages. It's time to wrap here soon. So we love the questions. Please, yes, I think our contact information is right here. If you have more, as you can tell, Bill and I geek out over this stuff. And we are more than happy to speak with you. And yes, we do demo. And actually, with having we could set up a call to walk you through that. And
yeah, we've had
really
customers
excited.
send
Thanks
us
again for
sample.
having me, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I'm sorry to talk over you at the end. We've had customers send us sample data, and then we visualize it for them so they get an idea of what it is, right? So we had a company that was a solar company, and we took the data that had geotags and showed them the areas where they had the most sales or the areas that they have the most potential, and we overlaid it over top of a map. So it's going to be specific for each individual company, but we'd love to talk more with you, and we're here. And thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And the questions were great. We could keep going, but for the interest of time, I think we're being told we need to wrap it up, Karen. Shocker,
yeah.
We went over.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good day.